Hi there, what's going on, and welcome to another video. Hope you guys are doing well, and just before we get into anything else, I hope you've had a good holidays. We're still on Boxing Day at the moment, so I'm still got a couple more days of holidays, and we get into New Year and things like that. So I hope everyone's had a good few days. I understand that you can't really do much this year, but I hope you still made it as good as possible. So getting into the video. In this video, I want to talk about Raider.io. As you can see at the moment on screen, it's just some background footage of me playing my chamois. I've actually really enjoyed playing my chamois at the moment. Again, only doing low keys at the moment just because his gear's awful, but I've actually been quite enjoying it. They're very strong at the moment. I'm playing Ellie in this one, but normally I play Resto. And I've come across the thing now where my main has a decent enough Raider.io score for me to get into groups on my main, but it's not high enough for people to instantly invite me on my own. And I just wanted to talk about Raider.io. I've talked to a couple of people in the guild and my community that just what do they think? What do they think about Raider.io? It's been heavily related to things like gear score, which then translated into obviously the item level type scenario. But I actually like Raider.io. I think it does hold a lot of value in the game currently. So the reason for that is there are three different types of groups that run Mythic Plus. Okay, obviously Raider.io being heavily related to Mythic Plus. There are three different types of groups. The first group is the guild groups. Okay, they're the groups that are going to be less interested in your Raider.io, more interested in just you as a player, if it's friends that you're going with or things like that. And in terms of guildies, it does also kind of relate to friends as well. You're running with friends, they're not going to be interested in your Raider.io, much more interested in bringing you along because they know that you're either a good or whatever player. The second type of groups is Pugs. Now this is where Raider.io really comes into its own, in that while just because I have a high Raider.io score doesn't mean I know every mechanic and I'm going to play perfectly. It doesn't, and people need to step away from that mentality. It means that I should know a lot of the mechanics. I also should be able to handle the pressures of the higher keys because they do get a bit stressful. I also should be able to pull equivalent throughput, either healing, DPS, or if I'm tanking, be able to survive. I should be able to survive at that level in terms of any scenario. And again, like I said, you could have someone with 1,000 Raider.io score right now go into a 3 and do fail mechanics. You could have someone with 100 Raider.io go into a 15 and perform fine. It doesn't define people. It's just one of those things that I think is a really good guide for Pugs when you have very little else to go on. You got to remember, if we didn't have Raider.io, what would be evaluating Pugs on right now? The third type of group is pre-made groups. Now again, Raider.io comes into its own here as well, in that a lot of the groups that form are either things like professional groups where they merge between two different groups, or they formed from things like the Discord groups or a set of Pugs that then start playing with each other a little bit more. You tend to need Raider.io to get into the high enough keys to actually look to start forming groups in the game at the moment, teams in the moment. So I think Raider.io does hold a lot in the game right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through what you want to be looking for on Raider.io and why I recommend going to the website as opposed to just looking at the in-game information. So let's have a look. So this is my Druid's Raider.io currently. I'm at 932 Mythic Plus score. I'm really pushing for the 1,000 at the moment. So this is one thing you want to have a look for here. Okay. So this gives you a lot of information. This tells you that I typically play tank and DPS, with Feral being my least played spec. So if I tipped up to a Mythic Plus group as Feral, I would then start panicking a little bit more than if I tipped up as a tank. Yeah? It also shows the kind of average keys I'm running. Now, between 2 and a 5, I'm only timed 7 keys. Between a 5 and a 10, I've timed 40 keys, and between a 10 plus, I've timed 14. Now, there is another category at 15 plus. I haven't actually timed any 15s yet. I haven't actually ran any 15s yet. We look here as well. This is all irrelevant. Now, I say it's irrelevant. It's really nice score to boost your ego, but it doesn't give you any information at the moment. Ultimately, I'm the second highest druid tank on the realm, but I'm on a very, very small, unpopulated realm. That doesn't even put me in the top 1,000 world. Whereas I could go to somewhere like Kazakh or Twisting Nether or whatever on the EU realms, Taran Mill, and I'd probably be top 20 tank, druid tank, but that means less. So it doesn't. I would ignore that information. This is where you want to start looking. So if I apply for a group as a tank, what I would expect the group leader to do, and just to kind of mention, I don't expect people to be doing this on a 13 key, on a 3 key. But when you start getting to higher keys, or keys that you're either really wanting to time or starting to get to the upper limit of your comfort zone, this is when I would start looking and doing a little bit of research into people. Now, you look here, right? All of my higher keys currently have been done on a fortified week. And that's because fortified, in my opinion, and shared by most people, is the easier week to do. So if it's a tyrannical week, I would potentially then go, okay, if I was going to run a Sanguine Depths 15 next week with tyrannical affixes, I would go and go, right, okay, so his highest tyrannical run is only an 11. So fine, he has done a 13, but his highest tyrannical run is only 11. Okay, now that's actually still pretty decent. It still means you're going to have to deal with Pridefalls and things like that. It should be fine to run sort of a 12, 13, 14, maybe even a 15 off that. But you start looking at and researching a little bit. And again, if I join as a tank, I would go in and look at specific tank runs, because it doesn't matter to me if you can heal a 15 if you're coming to tank my 13. Does that make sense? Yeah, so again, we can run through. Now, this is the other interesting part as well. You get a lot of score for almost timing higher keys. So this is the equivalent of timing an 11 key, is the amount of score I've got. But I didn't actually time it. I was quite far, at 11% over. So what I would say is that for me at the moment, there are certain dungeons, if you actually went and actually really analysed my runs, and I'll show you, I'll call myself out here. I've been farming Spires of Atonement at the moment just to get, it's my last one that I need is 10 plus timed. I cannot get a run at the moment. I'm just really struggling. It is the dungeon that I'm really struggling with. It's not the hardest one in the game. Things like Necrotic Wake are ones that people are struggling with at the moment. For me personally, that's actually one of my favourite dungeons. I think it's really, you have a lot to min-max in there. But Spires of Atonement, for some reason, just doesn't make sense to me at the moment. I've tried DPS and healing and tanking it, and I just cannot get a nice run at the moment. So for me, if I was then applying for Spires of Atonement and people came and looked at my Raider IO, I would potentially be seeing warning signs that I've done a 12, a 13, and 2 11s and not timed any of them if I was applying to a 12 or a 13. Now, it means I've got good experience in the dungeon, but it means that I'm not timing this. So something's going wrong there. So just to top it all off, I would be, if I was to get my 13 key right now and go and run a dungeon, I would probably do a little bit of research into each person. If you actually look at the information that you get in-game from Raider IO, you don't get as much information. You can see if they've timed it or not, but you don't get to see what weeks they timed it on. So if they're applying during a tyrannical week and it's a fortified week that they timed it, they might not know the boss mechanics as well, because bosses are dying in 30, 40 seconds this week, as opposed to 2 or 3 minutes next week. So if we just look at my Raider IO quickly, it gives me the raid information, that's great, but it doesn't show me any information as to when I timed the keys. It also doesn't show which one is my predominant spec because I'm playing all 3, so it doesn't tell you much information about what is my best spec. And it also, and that's about it. So I would definitely go out there and say, look, just, it also isn't showing that I've killed Sire. I have killed Sire, don't panic, I'm not that much of a noob. Just don't do it. Yeah, so I would just be a bit wary about just focusing on the information in game. I think Raider IO is a very, very good tool to be used, and I hope people do start using it a little bit more in the right way. don't just rely on it solely because, as I said, someone with 100 Raider IO could come into your 15 and carry the run. And it has happened to me. I've seen people with very low Raider IO dominate in a Mythic Plus scenario. But it also means that you can go and have a look, and you can go and look at a bit of experience. I think this is good for the game at the moment. If you agree or disagree, please leave comments down below. I'm very interested to hear your arguments around this. But that's all for today. So I hope you guys have had good holidays, and I will speak to you soon. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.